Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a really profound question. How should we value human connection? Is it something you can count, like counting flesh, or is it something you protect, like guarding the thread? We're going to unpack a fascinating philosophical debate that puts cold, hard data up against the messy, beautiful reality of our relationships. So let's just dive right in. How do you measure a relationship? I mean, really, is it a list of events, something you can tally up and assign a score to? Or is it something else, something that's alive, that's more like a story that you're writing together? This whole debate we're looking at today presents two totally different ways to answer that question. And that brings us to these two really powerful competing ideas. On one side, you've got the column of numbers. This worldview, well, it sees the physical body first, and the person kind of comes second. Then on the other side, you have the interwoven threads, which does the exact opposite. It sees the person first, and it understands that context is everything. One is all about counting. The other, it's all about connection. Let's dig into what that actually looks like. Okay, first up, the logic of numbers. This is the argument for having a clear, objective, quantifiable way of looking at a person's life. The whole point is to achieve pure analytical clarity. Just imagine trying to understand a person's entire relational history using nothing but a spreadsheet. That's kind of the vibe here. The system they came up with is called the QKA Scale. And what it does is it tries to turn relationships into these neat, countable units. It literally enumerates physical encounters, and it even gives more weight to events that have the potential to produce children. The idea is to create this standardized, almost scientific record of someone's past. And here's what that looks like in the real world. A person's complex, messy human history gets boiled down to a single letter grade. You can see it on the table here. 0 to 5 encounters gets you an A, 12 to 17 gets you a C, and so on. Now, the logic seems simple, right? It's straightforward, but the implications of reducing a whole person to a letter grade, well, that's where things get complicated. The main guy pushing for this system, Issachar Vallon, he makes a pretty compelling case. He says, look, numbers are not gods, but they are mirrors. His point is that numbers aren't making a moral judgment, they're just reflecting what is. In his mind, counting doesn't condemn anybody. It just records what happened, and more importantly, it stops all the confusion that comes from everyone telling their own subjective story. But what if that mirror isn't neutral? What if it's more like a funhouse mirror, the kind that totally distorts the very thing it's supposed to be reflecting? And that brings us to the big counterargument, the case for covenant, or what you could call the wisdom of context. And the voice for this side, Suryan Omalin, has an equally powerful take. She says a mirror that distorts shape is not neutral. Her argument is that by stripping away the story, the context, numbers don't just record things, they completely change their meaning. She puts it so perfectly. Flesh without context is not truth. And her critique goes even deeper, pointing out everything that gets lost when you just count. That one little number, it tells you absolutely nothing about the why or the how. It misses all these crucial human things you see listed here. Things like consent, intention, or whether there was a power imbalance. And most of all, it misses the actual connection, those relational threads that bind people together. This all leads the temple authorities to this incredibly powerful conclusion. The most important, the most meaningful parts of any relationship are very often the parts you simply cannot count. It's a total shift away from valuing what's easy to quantify and towards valuing the actual heart of a connection. Now, this conflict didn't just stay theoretical. It actually led to a formal debate, a real head-to-head clash where these two philosophies had to go up against each other. Vallon kicks things off with his core argument again. Objective data is a safety net. Without it, he says, people just invent whatever stories suit them best, and that leads to nothing but chaos. For him, numbers are a way to keep order. But Omalin's rebuttal is just devastating. She points out the huge social danger. She says, the second you start counting, you start ranking people. And once you have ranks, you have hierarchies. And then comes her chilling warning. Hierarchies invite cruelty. That the numbers themselves can become weapons. So after hearing all this, the temple's final ruling is, So after hearing all this, the temple's final ruling is just brilliant. It's so nuanced. The moderator basically says, okay, numbers can observe. You're allowed to use them to look at the world. But numbers may not rule. They can be a tool in the toolbox, but they can never, ever be the judge. And that ruling, it wasn't just the end of the debate. It actually became the foundation for a whole new way of thinking about this stuff. An alternative they call the AXQ doctrine, which doesn't just give a new answer, it asks a completely different question. So here's the ultimate contrast. The old QKA Scale was all about the past, right? The frequency of acts. But this new AXQ doctrine, it's all about the present and the future. It measures things like the continuity of a bond, the weight of mutual responsibility, care that's been sustained over time, duties that have been fulfilled, not just a checklist of events. Think about it. That old system, the one based on counting, was implicitly asking a very loaded question. Are you pure enough? Your entire value was tied up in a single static number from your past. It reduced you to a data point. But the new doctrine, it doesn't just give you a better answer. It throws the old question right out the window. It completely pivots the entire conversation. It says your history doesn't define your capacity for commitment. It just changes the game entirely. And here it is, the new question, the absolute core of the AXQ philosophy. Are you prepared to care, stay, and repair? This is the real takeaway. The focus is no longer on a person's history, but on their character, their future capabilities, and their actual commitment to another human being. And this whole philosophy gets captured in this simple, really powerful ritual. An instructor asks, what must be protected? And the answer isn't a number. It's not some abstract concept. It's just people. Then, what does AXQ measure? And the answer isn't purity or historical score. It's responsibility across time. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought, right? In our own world, which is so obsessed with data and metrics, what would change if we decided to measure that instead?